Welcome to this edition of Iowa Magazine Extra, an interview program to run as a companion to stories published in Iowa Magazine. Today we're in conversation with Sam Rae. Sam is an Iowa City native who received degrees in music and Spanish from the University of Iowa. She is an active touring musician and in many ways a music innovator. Trained as a classical cellist, Sam took her instrument in new directions toward a genre that could be called alt folk. She's toured with Brandi Carlile and has performed with legendary artists like Tanya Tucker and Sheryl Crow, as well as the groundbreaking and barrier-busting supergroup, the Highwomen. Sam joins us today from Charleston, South Carolina. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
We were talking before the program about some of your earliest memories of music. Growing up in Iowa City, how did music play a role in your life?
I started off with my mom kind of playing it in the background of every moment that there was space. So music was constantly playing in my house. And although none of my family members were super musical, I definitely was interested in playing an instrument. We went out and picked out a cello at West Music out in Coralville. And I kind of didn't know what I was going to pick, even when we walked in. I wanted to play the saxophone. There were too many kids that wanted to play the saxophone. So I kind of like closed my eyes and just like pointed to one. Although there was some determining factors in that decision. But I'm so glad that I chose the cello.
Well, I think that music is one of those things that when you're performing with an ensemble or a group and you're hearing yourself and you're hearing the others, and maybe you're being able to see the audience react a little bit. I mean, when you're in a groove, regardless of the genre, it's got to feel good.
Yeah, especially there's something about, I was in women's choir in City High. And there was something about the sound that I was experiencing at that time that once we hit these like pinnacle moments in the song and everyone was hitting the note right and there's these overtones happening and it's just a really epic experience, something similar to what I felt when I played in a quartet in college, is that intricacy of sounds and the way you can start predicting everyone's movement. So you're not only connecting to the audience, but you're also like getting to know these people around you on a level that is just without words, really. We were together in college for about 3 years. And by the end of those 3 years, we were just like in tune. I knew when the violinist was going to, do this certain expression and I would kind of back out a little and let them go. And just like knowing how to weave your sound into everything. So you're not stepping on toes, but you're also contributing to the sound as a whole is like, I mean, there's really no other feeling. I'm getting chills just talking about it, but...
Let's reach back to when we were talking about your time at the University of Iowa and improvisational cello, as you mentioned, because I find this a fascinating part of your career in what you do with the loops. And you're in the School of Music, and I'm guessing that many of your classmates are studying to be sort of classically trained musicians and maybe play in orchestras or teach in music schools or wherever it is they might be. But you're stepping out over a couple of lines with your own art. Describe that process and how the university faculty or your colleagues, your peer students, how they helped you.
That process was really magical and also intimidating. I knew I wanted to go a different direction. And from the get-go, I felt like I was fitting a triangle into a circle. It wasn't quite fitting. My brain didn't work like that. A lot of my colleagues were pursuing a Bachelor of Music. And I decided to switch it to a Bachelor of Arts so I could take jazz classes. And I had a lot more flexibility with the kind of musical influences I was choosing to like affect my musical progression. So I don't know. It was such a great moment when I figured out I could create these loops and just like basically show the audience how composition works. So, and in that particular song also will never happen again. I think there's something really unique and beautiful in that experience too, to tell the audience like this song is for you and it will never occur ever again. Even if it was, you know, something we want to hear again, it's not gonna be available, you know? But my cello professor kind of saw that in me. He saw me struggling. He saw me struggling with my practicing and like stretching myself really thin with a lot of different activities. And I'm sure he probably caught wind that I was considering dropping that major, you know, and it was definitely going through my mind. And one of those like pivotal moments, there's a few pivotal moments in my musical career that have just keep turning me back towards the music. You know, I get like turned away a little bit and someone comes along and kind of just helps me shift back towards the main focus. And so Tony did that. He lent me his electric cello to play around with. And then I went and saw Zoe Keating at the Englert Theater. And I left that show and immediately bought a looper, an amp, and a pickup for my cello. I tucked him in the corner of my attic apartment for probably like 6 to 8 months. And then an opportunity arose for me to play cello behind this poet on a radio station for a live audience. And so I did so, and he offered me to play my own song afterwards. So my immediate comfort zone would have been like a Bach, you know, cello prelude. But I was like, no, you know what? I think I'm going to plug in my loop pedal. So I plugged it in once before I went to the radio station. I didn't even know what inputs or quarter inches. I didn't know what any of that even meant. So I plugged it in once. Somehow it worked. And I figured, okay, if it worked once, it's got to work twice. So I went to the radio station and plugged it all in and played this song where I just kind of wove these cello layers together to create a song. And the reaction was something pivotal for me. It was incredible. So,
For those who don't know, describe looping. It's a digital recording process that allows you to record a phrase, replay it, and then move on.
Yeah. So there's a pedal at my foot, my right foot, where I can press. And the moment I press it, it starts recording. And if I hit it right on time, it'll loop exactly what I've recorded. So essentially repeats that line, and then I can lay stuff on top of that. And I generally like to keep it really simple. I think too many loops can just be overwhelming and you lose the sense of the song. So I usually do a rhythmic loop on the bottom and then a more melodic loop on top of that. And then essentially I can pull those loops in and out and create, you know, A and B parts and really just write a song in front of an audience.
So it's 2011. You're getting ready to graduate. You have your degrees in music and Spanish. And now you're deciding to make music your career. Walk us through that process.
I was thinking about that question earlier this morning, and it feels a little bit like love, although that sounds a little hokey, cheesy maybe, but being in love and like also playing music are similar to me, where you just wake up and you decide that that's what you're doing. Like you're in it. So it's kind of a day-to-day choice, because I'm constantly like battling with self-doubt and like fear and financial struggles, and wanting to eventually progress on and have a family. And there's all these things that I'm constantly thinking about. But there's always the internal compass that kind of guides me back to, this is what you're doing. And the reason why I do it, I was reminded, of course, via this last tour that I did, is just the ability to connect with so many different people.
We'll move into talking about touring here in a little bit, but what inspires you to write? What do you have a normal process you follow? And then when is a song ready to go for the public?
I mean, there could be so many answers to those questions, but for me personally, when I write a song, generally in the past, it's been very inspired by movement. So when I'm traveling, and it sounds maybe a little strange, but when I'm on airplanes, songs just start flooding through my head, and I'm on my note, in my notes app, just like typing all the lyrics down, and I spend the whole flight just writing down lyrics that later I'll go back and kind of sort through and see what's actually, good and what's actually bad in my own mind. So touring and traveling and specifically plane rides are where my mind starts writing lyrics. Sometimes it's like in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. and I'll wake up with something in my head. But of course, during the pandemic, that wasn't really happening. So I was like really feeling really like terrified that I wasn't going to be able to write any songs. But I did. I found other ways. Of course, we get into these comfort zones and we think that's the only environment we can work under, but we're human and we can always stretch and like do it other ways. So writing songs in the pandemic was very fun because it was forcing me to really I was really having to pull out stuff from the depths because I wasn't feeling very creative and I didn't want to write songs. And I was making myself do it. It was actually an extremely rough time for me. And so I was writing these songs and I'd take them to this open mic out on Folly Beach and play them immediately after I wrote them because I was just craving that discomfort. I just wanted to go on stage and fumble around, and that little piece, the ability to go out there and play my new songs was something that kept me going. So
do the words come first, or does music come first, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter, but for me, it goes both ways. Largely, I like to focus on the lyrics and then try to find the chords that will go with it. But if the last couple of years have taught me anything, there's no one way to do anything. So gotta find alternative ways to write. In which case, I was doing it as many ways as I could just to get something out. I was like, come on, just write something.
We were starting to talk about touring and what life is like on the road. Tell us a little bit about that first time you loaded up and went out and hit the streets.
It's really invigorating. I mean, the planning part is one thing where you spend about, 4 to 5 hours a day for a couple months, emailing with like hundreds of different people. It's like juggling as many plates as I think I'm capable of, maybe more than I'm capable of. But once you hit the road and you load up on that first day, it's like, you get to leave the logistical part behind and you just get to go and play. And kind of reap the benefits of all that work leading up to the start of the tour. So on the road, like being in the car with a couple people for that long too, you just really get to know each other. And there's this like slow progression of comfort and conversations and what we talk about just start to really like open up by the end. So getting to know someone in that way is very unique and great. And then there's the whole aspect of playing shows with the same people every night, and you really get to hone in on it because you're playing the same songs almost every night. And I like to mix it up a little bit, but this last tour we went on, we were singing 3-part harmonies, and it was the first tour that I had brought 2 people on to do that with. And it was just so special. By the end of the tour, our harmonies were like just so in sync, and it was just very satisfying to feel that. And then there's touring as a contracted cellist. That's a very different experience where the planning is already set out for me, and I show up at the airport and I go somewhere. And I meet up with the band and we go on stage and play. and then I head back to the airport, you know. It's a very fleeting process, and it depends on, you know, the way that any particular band tours, but a large part of my time with Brandi was just flying out for a few shows and then coming home and then going back out again. We only did a few bus tours, which were longer, but that's also invigorating. It's in a whole nother realm. You know, I'm not singing my own music. I'm getting to support someone who I admire, like on a massive level. Brandi and the twins write incredible music, and they're great people, and I just learned so much songwriting wise from watching them write on the road, especially when we were touring on the bus, just absorbing everything that was going on like a sponge, gaining, you know, info on how to handle aspects of the business and venues, and also just presenting yourself on stage and kind of managing your exertion of energy, and how do you not get worn out? How do you continue doing it and bring the same level of energy every night? And Brandi really had dialed that in terms of like saving energy every night for the audience, for the show. And I really admired that part. Anyway, so that was me kind of just being a sponge. You know, my own tours are me kind of being the organizer and the logistical lead, and choosing what songs to sing, and getting these people together to play music. So similar aspects, but also very, very different ends of the spectrum.
So let's jump back 2 years, spring 2020, and we don't know what's really happening except tours are canceled and venues are closing. Walk us through a little bit about your immediate thought process, and then as the pandemic sort of drew on and more uncertainty was there, we talked about how it might have impacted your writing at the time, but as a business person, how's that hitting you?
There were many moments during the pandemic where I convinced myself I was quitting. And that's the fear and the doubt, though, and like that internal compass always came back, and it was like, no, you know, it's not really an option. And I even tried it mentally for like a month. I was like, okay, you know, this is it, and it just didn't fit. It didn't work. It was like fitting the wrong shape into a, you know, like I said earlier, a triangle into a circle, or it was just those thoughts that were trying to dictate my future that were based out of fear. And so eventually I came around, and, you know, after pretty much a long period of some depression and just like feeling really defeated, started forcing myself to write music again, which I said earlier, I, you know, was having to really pull it out. It wasn't coming naturally. It was like rolling my eyes at myself, you know. Like I'd write a line and then I'd read it back to myself, and I'd just like roll my eyes, and then I'd write another line, and, you know, eventually I got to some stuff that I really liked, you know, and that's where my next album is going, and it's just a different approach. But yeah, it was hard. I mean, towards the end of the pandemic, I was at a point where I definitely like found a therapist, and I started like taking care of myself more, and trying to go outside and exercise, and find some time for music, and find a job that might help me get ahead a little bit financially. And then I kind of started slowly digging my way out of the hole. And a big piece of that was booking this tour that I just did, which was, part of me was like, what if I don't like touring anymore, you know? Like, that would be horrible. And then the other part of me was like, that's not possible, you know? And which was true. I went on this tour, and it was amazing, and it, you know, brought me back to life in many ways. So to say it was a roller coaster is an understatement.
You mentioned the new album. Let's talk about that. Tell us about what you have in the works.
Well, it's very different from my last one in that I'm very unattached to it. And my last record, 10,000 Years, I just put 3 years of and so much time and so much resource into that album. And this next one is mostly consisting of songs I wrote during the pandemic, which was a different writing style for me. Like I said, it wasn't like, oh, here they are, the lyrics are just here. It was like sifting through this pile of rubble in my head, really, and pulling out random like cookie, you know, the fortune teller cookie strips of paper that said random things and trying to like piece them together. It just felt very haphazard. So that's kind of what it is. Although it's more concise than that. It's not random strings of thought. But recording wise, I've been very unattached to it and just kind of, for example, we recorded the bass guitar, you know, my guitar line and my main vocal line in this empty house in Hollywood, South Carolina, just with like 2 mics, you know. And then we recorded the guitars and harmonies in Laramie, Wyoming recently. But the pieces, I'm just letting them kind of like fall where they fall.
When will we get to hear it?
Oh, it's still really in that realm of, you know, as an artist releasing music, there's these stages I go through. It's like, and I'm still in that stage where I'm like, is it gonna be good enough? You know? And so who knows? I have to kind of get through this next phase of like, we just recorded all of the layers in Laramie, Wyoming, and we haven't put them on the actual tracks themselves yet. So I'm just excited to see where things evolve, and I know it will be good enough, and I know that's just like my own thing, but easily could be out in, you know, 6 to 12 months.
Who do you listen to?
Oh man, I really like My Brightest Diamond. She's an incredible singer, and her musical partner arranges these really great string parts. Joni Mitchell is someone who I'm deeply inspired by. She's like ingrained in my psyche. My mom played Joni all the time. And then when I went to college, I listened to one of her albums she recorded later in life with a full symphony orchestra. It's really, really incredible. And so my versions of Joni come from that, actually, which is, you know, maybe unique, I don't know, but I guess I'm just an orchestra nerd at heart. Joni Mitchell, you know, Neil Young's simplicity in his guitar and his songwriting, I'm inspired by that. Bon Iver, his kind of atmospheric, the way he creates songs, seemingly with lyrics that you can't understand, is really attractive to me, because his songs still have feelings, but you can't always understand the lyrics, which is impressive. Zoe Keating was one that started me on my cello stuff, so that was an epic turn for me. Jacqueline Dupre, who it was a cellist. I started watching videos of her play concertos in college, and I think that was a shift for me too. Watching her expressiveness in those videos, I was like enthralled and amazed by her ability to just like leave everything out there. You know, even in the classical realm, it's like sometimes hard to come by that kind of emotion that makes you almost just want to like burst into tears.
You're 11 years now removed from the University of Iowa. If you were to come back to campus and meet with some students today that were interested in making music their career, what kind of advice would you share?
Oh, well, I guess the first thing I would say is practicing is useful, but don't take yourself too seriously. So that you can loosen up and like find the emotion in there, you know, getting too technical and too, I don't know. It's just easy to lose sight of that emotional part of music where you're super present, and not always accessible either, you know, but when it is, it's nice to tap into. I'd say don't grasp onto any one aspect of music too tightly, because if you have kind of a loose grasp at that young of an age, you can really like hone in on what you really want. You know, our society puts a lot of pressure on 18-year-olds basically choosing their career at that age, and it's pretty crazy. I changed my major like 3 times, so I really, you know, the saying, you know, what you put into it, you get out of it. I utilized that at the University of Iowa, and I was able to like feel that freedom to change my major a lot until it felt right. So, yeah, not being too consumed by the pressures of your surrounding to like figure something out and just choose it and just stick with it. You know, you don't have to do that.
Sam, I can't tell you enough how much I've enjoyed this conversation and learning about your career, your experiences at Iowa, getting back on the road and the vibes you get from there. And I can't wait for the new record to come out. Please let us know when that's available. And I hope we can see you in Iowa City very soon. Unfortunately, as we talked earlier, the mill is gone, but we'll find another venue.
Sounds good.
Sam, thanks for joining us this afternoon. All the best to you as you're spending time out on the road, and we're very excited to see what happens next in your career, in your life.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, that concludes another edition of the Iowa Magazine Extra, a program that runs as a companion to articles in the Iowa Magazine. Today, we are in conversation with Sam Rae.